March 4, 1891. Bridgeport Morning News, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Romance and mystery. Dreamland's revelations point the way to a fortune. A dead husband's advice. In the widow's dreams, he told her of an estate which should be hers. A skeptical lawyer makes some astonishing discoveries. New York, March 3rd. A lawsuit will be begun shortly which involves a strange story of romance and mystery. The plaintiff is a client of lawyer Benjamin Patterson of 284 Broadway. Mrs. Grace Bushnell is her name. She is a woman in the prime of life, comely and intelligent. Her home is at Greenbush near Albany. Lawyer Patterson has friends in Greenbush who recommended him to her for advice. Mrs. Bushnell is the widow of the late John Francis Bushnell, who served in the 9th New York Cavalry during the late war. Bushnell entered the Army as a private. At the end of the war, he retired with the rank of major. He settled down in Upper New York, married the present Mrs. Bushnell, who was his second wife, in 1867, and he died without issue in 1889. Since the beginning of the year, Mrs. Bushnell has been a regular weekly visitor to Lawyer Patterson's office. She does not claim to be a spiritualist, but certain revelations which she says have been given to her in dreams are tending to make her a staunch believer in the supernatural. Mrs. Bushnell's first visit to Lawyer Patterson occurred on January 4. She introduced herself as the late Major Bushnell's widow and said that she had a vague sort of idea that a large estate at Port Richmond, Staten Island, belonged to her. When Mr. Patterson asked the lady to give her reasons, she said that the only one she had was revealed to her in a dream. On New Year's Eve, she explained, I fell asleep while looking into the fire. I dreamed that my husband appeared at my side. He twined his arm about my neck, and folding me to his breast, he said, Gracie, you are poor and you ought to be rich. There is a big estate in Port Richmond which belongs to you. It belonged to me while I lived, but I never told you about it. I had intended to mention it to you before I died, but I left your world suddenly and could not. Mr. Patterson felt very skeptical when he heard this, and told Mrs. Bushnell very candidly that he did not think it worth his while to institute an investigation on the very flimsy basis she offered. He spoke to her kindly and advised her to go home, dream again, and get more facts. Mrs. Bushnell did dream again. Within a week, she was back at the lawyer's office with an elaboration of her first dream. She said that the late Major Bushnell had appeared from Shadowland once more. In answer to her questions, he said that the estate had an estate of about 20 acres, that it was on the riverfront, and that it contained about 300 lots. But the lawyer continued to remain skeptical and look upon his visitor as the dupe of alleged spiritualists, which she was not, and a very emotional woman, which she really was. Mrs. Bushnell continued her visits, and although she was unable to gather any more facts about the estate from her ghostly husband, she became more and more clamorous in her requests that a search should be made for her title. Mrs. Bushnell offered a liberal fee as a reward for the work, which fee Mr. Patterson refused, for his client was by no means wealthy. Impressed, however, by the earnestness and somewhat annoying persistence of the woman, he caused an investigation to be instituted. Imagine his astonishment on discovering two remarkable facts. In the first place, he found that there was such an estate as the one described, and, second, that Mrs. Bushnell had a claim for dower in it. The records of a habeas corpus proceeding pending in this county disclose the fact that the child, a girl, who was supposed to be the heir to this property, was not the daughter of Major Bushnell's brother, who was legally entitled to it. The papers in the case show that the child was the daughter of a lady whose husband had deserted her and gone west. Determined to follow her husband and find him, the lady placed her baby girl in charge of a friend, agreeing to pay her a small sum monthly for the little one's support. On her return east after an absence of 2 years, the lady was astounded to learn that none of the remittances sent by her had been received by her baby's guardian, and that her little girl had been handed over to a charitable institution as an abandoned child. The distracted mother, who was now very poor, applied to the charitable institution and was told that her little one was dead to her forever, having been adopted by a good and wealthy gentleman. It furthermore appears that the mother made strenuous efforts through all the courts to obtain her child on habeas corpus proceedings and failed. Action will now be brought by lawyer Patterson to establish Mrs. Grace Bushnell's right to the estate in Port Richmond. May 17, 1873. The Covington Journal, Covington, Kentucky. Ghosts by J.G. A remarkable detection of murder through the alleged appearance of a ghost occurred in 1724. A farmer, returning homeward from Southam Market in Warwickshire, disappeared by the way. Next day, a man presented himself at the farmer's house and asked of the wife if her husband had come back. "No," she replied, "and I am under the utmost anxiety and terror." "Your terror," said he, "cannot surpass mine, for last night, as I lay in my bed, quite awake, the apparition of your poor husband appeared to me. He showed me several ghastly stabs in his body, which is now lying in a marl pit. The pit was searched, the corpse was found, and the stabs, in number and position, answered in every way to the description of the ghost seer, to whom the spectre had named a certain man as the culprit, and this person was committed to prison and brought to trial at Warwick for the crime, before a jury and the Lord Chief Justice Sir Robert, afterward Lord, Raymond, who was succeeded in 1733 by Sir Philip York. The jury would speedily have brought in a verdict of guilty, but he checked them by saying, "Gentlemen, you lay more stress on the allegations of this apparition than they will bear. I cannot give credit to these kinds of stories. We are now in a court of law and must determine according to it. And I know not of any law which will admit of the testimony of an apparition, nor yet, if it did, doth the ghost appear to give evidence?" He added, "Call the ghost." The farmer's spirit being thrice summoned in vain, Sir Robert again addressed the jury on the hitherto unblemished character of the man accused, and stoutly asserted a belief in his perfect innocence, adding, "I do strongly suspect that the gentleman who saw the apparition is himself the murderer, and knew all about the stabs and marl pit without any supernatural assistance. Hence, I deem myself justified in committing him to close custody till further inquiries are made." The result of these was that, on searching his house, sufficient proofs of his guilt were found. He confessed his crime and was executed at the next assize.